All right, we're here talking with Dave Lefebre. Dave, thanks for taking some time to join us today.
Sure, how you doing, man?
Doing great, doing great. So today we got a lot of stuff to cover. We're going to go over some Beaver Lake stuff for the upcoming tour event. We got a bunch of fan questions we'll ask you. But I think kind of one of the first things I want to talk to you about is you've been a busy guy over the off season. You built a house, correct?
Yeah, we've been at it for about 8 months now. It's supposed to take three, and ended up taking about eight. So yeah, we're still got a little ways to go, but that was the summer project.
And I believe one of those things, and I think I've seen some pictures on Facebook. You got a pretty sweet garage to keep your boat in. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, it's still not done. I posted a few pictures on my Facebook page, but they're premature. I've got all the tackles that I want to hang in the gator board and stuff like that. I haven't got it up yet. I'll just put some stuff on the walls just to get it where I can see it. But I'm looking at June or July before I actually get it done. But it's got the basic structure is done. I just have to get it needs to be taped and painted and stuff like that. But the drywall's all up, and I got to get heat in there and that kind of stuff. But it turned out really good. I've been dreaming about that and playing it out, taking some ideas from buddies and stuff like that over the last 10 years probably. I've been anxious to build it, and it turned out really good.
And you have a dock that you basically pull up next to, right? So it's boat level. So you can just jump
Yeah,
right out onto the dock.
yeah. My contractors said that's the first time they ever built a house around a garage. And the main thing I wanted to do in there was put a dock. Just like you're on the water, I pull in there and it's level with my deck of my boat, so I can just get in and out real easy. And all my tackles organized where it's on top of that dock, so I can just, tackle boxes in and out. If you're building something, it's relatively easy to do that. It's just the idea of it, I think, is really cool. I've never seen it done before. It worked out exactly the way I was hoping. It was kind of a gamble, scary thing, but worked out good.
Well, cool. And I assume you're going to keep the pictures rolling as you get towards the end of completion.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll keep you updated on that. I'm anxious to get it all done.
Yeah, you can keep the rest of us dreaming.
No, it's really not the dock part. That's not very. It's an expensive thing to do. You got room in there, and you're a serious fisherman. It's not too outlandish. I don't think it's pretty cool.
All right. Well, we'll move on. You've been doing a little crappie fishing too, right?
A little bit. I've been real busy. I'm doing a lot of promotional stuff and that this year, but I've got out about three or four times, on the ice, and that's about it. Usually, I've been out, a lot more than I have this year, for sure.
Where do you usually head out to when you do your crappie fishing?
Well, we got some really good lakes around my house. Ann and I and the kids just moved about 20 miles north where we had been.
Okay.
We're a little further away from the inland lakes, but there's Presque Isle Bay. I'm real close to that. Chautauqua Lake, it's a real famous bass tournament lake.
Sure.
It's got big crappies in there, and another lake called Pymatuming I go to a lot. But there's probably 10 little lakes around there I can go and catch. If the ice is safe enough, I can get out where I can catch a lemon and crappies every time you go. So I miss it. I'm actually staying at Bo's house right now, and we might actually go out and do some crappie fishing this week. So I'm fired up about it.
There you go. There you go. And you said you've been doing some promotional work, and kind of tying in with that. Rapala came out with a new bait this year, a new line of baits, the Scatter Rap series. And I think we got a lot of questions too about how much have you gotten to play with those?
I've played with them a little bit. This is going to be my first week where I can really go out there and throw it a lot. But from what I've seen in the tank, I've been doing tank demos all around the country here, and it just blows my mind. The bait itself, the way that it has that typical signature Rapala wobble, but at the same time, it's hung. It's wobbling, going back and forth. And some of the ones I had at the class, each bait's a little bit different. They're all really good. Some of them walk the dog a little bit more than the others. But I had one at the Classic that was actually hitting the tank, the glass on both sides of the tank. And that's a pretty wide swath going through the water. Right now, across the country, the water's a little bit cold. And this is going to be more of it should start to play. It might play at Beaver Lake. That might be the first time it really gets to show its colors. But they're selling like hotcakes. I don't even have all the ones I want exactly right now. So I got some on order trying to get them in this week. But it's a revolutionary deal. I'm excited about it.
And one question I kind of had about that scatter wrap, there's been a lot of stuff online or on the internet about, is it going to kind of replace a square bill? But what exactly does that bait look like when it does deflect off something? Because it already has such an erratic action to begin with.
Well, that's one thing I've got to play with it, and I haven't caught too many fish. I've got 3 or 4 fish on, but like I said, it's too cold right now, water temperatures. But I have got to throw it in some cover, and Aunt has too. We were both playing around with it, and we've thrown it in treetops that normally you get snagged with the crankbait. And that's kind of a bonus feature that wasn't really in the promotional plans with that bait, but it comes through stuff. It's just unbelievable. I threw it in a treetop like 20 times trying to get stuck. And then you take your typical square bill, throw it in there, and get stuck on the first or second cast every single time. So it's definitely got, the snag resistant qualities. But that's the beauty of it. You don't have to deflect off anything. That's why I think it's going to be a real good summertime bait, maybe for suspended fish or whatever. I'm excited to find out where it shines the best. But it just appears like it's hitting stuff all the time. So, and we all know that's what triggers our bite. So
Absolutely.
it's more of a suspended type thing, I'm thinking, or especially those big small ones where I live.
Oh, now you're talking.
Right.
So let's get started with this. Let's talk about beaver. This kind of lake, I know when we as the pundits made our picks for fantasy fishing, we were kind of thinking, oh, it's going to be a spawn kind of deal. But it's not really looking like it's going to set up that way. What do you think, or how do you think this tournament's going to play out?
Well, I was kind of hoping it would, be an early spawn this year, and we'd get in on a little bit of that. But you're right. Looking at the water temperatures and the way the water levels working out, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen. It's going to be similar to last year, and I'm fishing a PAA. The reason I'm in Knoxville, I just fished a PAA here on Douglas Lake, and I'm heading straight to Beaver from here. But this tournament was dominated by those umbrella rigs, and Beaver Lake is looking to shape up, the same type of deal. So that's what I look. All the other things, if it turns into one of those deals where the umbrella type rigs are the bait, you can pretty much catch everything else you can buy. So it's either that. Of course, I'm not going to be doing it. So I just have to try to figure out a way to get a couple of key bites a day and try to hang in that top 30 and survive this one.
And kind of speaking of wanting to hang in the top 30, Beaver Lake's kind of one of those lakes that for you in the past has always kind of been a so-so place for you. Do you kind of have a different mindset to go into practice this year, or do you always just kind of wipe the slate clean and just take beaver as it is?
I wipe it clean every time, and as far as the last 3 years anyway. And I've started to do a little better that way. I actually, unbelievably, somehow led it like 2 years ago. So I'm kind of, I had 2 really good finishes back to back. I think last year I struggled a little bit, but that was because of the rig, I think. But I don't know. I'm excited about that tournament. Every year I learn a little bit more. And I'm going to start over when I get there. I've got a few, places that I always fish come tournament time, and I always want to check those deals out, and I get a big bite every time. So this year I'm definitely going to change that part at least. I'm not going to check history spots. Those are places I'm just going to hit cold in the tournament. And I don't see myself practicing a whole lot for this one. You don't want to burn any fish at Beaver Lake.
Sure. And beavers kind of traditionally fish pretty small anyway, and this year water's a little lower, so it may fish even smaller. Does that kind of have any concern for you?
No, it's always fished small. You know, as far as the tour goes, that's the lake that we fished the most. So we're all pretty used to the way that it fishes and understand that there's going to be those situations on the water where somebody else is going to find the same fish or the same pattern or whatever. So I pretty much got that mindset going in. I think we all do.
And just kind of your predictions. What do you think we're going to see for weights to make that top 20 cut?
Oh gosh, you're killing me on that one. You're getting better. I'd say if you probably looked at last year's standings, we'd probably be right in the same ballpark, maybe a little bit higher. Low water, depending on how far it's, you know, if it's coming up rapidly or whatever. If it's kind of staying stable with that lower water, it actually will play into the favor of the fishermen, I think, and you know, it'll shrink the lake down and it'll make the fish a little bit more predictable. But I think the weights, if you look at last year's weights, you can go on F1 and look at that. Probably add a little tiny bit, maybe a pound or two to everything, figure it out that way.
Sure, sure. Let's see, what else we got to cover here? I'd say, huh?
Nice shirt you got there.
Yeah, you like that? I figured, you know, I might as well try to look like the Frosted Flakes Pro yourself. I think it even has your signature on it too.
Cool, sporting the colors.
Yeah, yeah.
I just like it. Awesome.
Well, before we get to some fan questions here, I guess, is there anything else you think we need to know for Beaver Lake this year?
Not really anything else that we haven't talked about. I think it's going to be similar to past years, you know, which the only difference is the rig. You know, the water's going to be a little colder than we've been, and this will only be our second time there using these type of umbrella rigs. So that's the only common denominator. I think that's the only thing that can change it and make the weights a little bit higher than we've seen in the past. That's about it.
All right. Well, if you're ready, I'm ready. I got a whole stack of questions here. Let's see. I guess our first one comes from John Trask. And he says, when you're traveling to tournaments in different parts of the country, do you have go-to methods that work on most lakes? Or do you pre-fish each lake differently depending on the location?
Well, that's a good question. Trask, last name, that's the road I grew up when I was younger. That's pretty interesting. But no, I think you know, I change it based on where we're going. We fish a lot of different types of lakes. My system is about the same everywhere. You know, I make sure I have a map, a good map of two, even. Or if there's 3 or 4 available, I try to get as many maps of that lake as I can. And a lot of my pre-work is done on the computer, you know, researching, you know, winning techniques on that lake, researching weights. You kind of got to know from lake to lake, you know, what you're fishing for. If you're on Olmsted, you know, you need 22-pound bags. If you're going to Beaver Lake, you know, you need 12-pound bags. So just general information off the internet, a lot of map study, and basically it's a seasonal type thing. Once you have a little grasp on, you know, what bass are doing at certain times of the year and what stage the lake is in when you go there, you can pretty much eliminate 3/4 of the lake, you know, by doing the right map study before you go there. So I pretty much have that same approach going in, and just to dwell on that a little further, you know, I really like to fish a jig and power fish. So when I go somewhere, that's the first thing that I'm trying to make happen. And I don't, you know, a lot of times I don't just try too hard. I can tell pretty quick if it's going to play or not, for me at least, and then I go from there. But usually I start to try to find some kind of power technique and then go from there.
All right. The next couple questions actually come from the same guy. His name's Randy Labono. And His first one is, what is your favorite lake to fish for largemouth, and what season is your favorite time to fish that lake?
I love where I live. I got some great lakes up there. We don't fish too many big tournaments around that area, but it looks like we might be going there in the future. I got my fingers crossed. But Prescott Bay, right where I live on Lake Erie, about 6 miles from the mouth of the bay, and that's one of my favorite places to fish. I think it's mainly because the time of the year that we're off, our off season, usually from the month of November and December. I'd say that would be my favorite time, just because we're off and I get to go and spend a few days in a row out there and try to figure out what's going on. Once you figure it out in that lake, in that bay, and even Chautauqua Lake, which is fairly close too. Once you figure out what they're doing in the fall, they're usually in giant groups, and it's just the time you can go catch 100 to 200 to 300 bass in one day, and they're always the fat ones, the bigger ones, that time of year in the fall. So that probably answered that question.
Randy's second question, which I think actually you're a pretty good guy to ask this to, he says, what's more impressive, a big largemouth or a big smallmouth?
To me, it's a big largemouth. There's just so many smallmouth where I live. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out and caught a 30-pound plus bag of brown ones, and I've just always been about trying to, even when I was younger, trying to win those tournaments with largemouth, even though there was no chance in heck I would ever get it done. I just tried to beat those guys with them, and it just never worked out how I did win one. I really like the largemouth. You catch a 5.5 to 6 pound largemouth up there, that's doing something. And smallmouth that size is average.
It's true, you are kind of spoiled with big brown fish up there, aren't you?
I think so. Yeah, I've been known for just not liking to fish for smallmouth up there. I'm crazy, but I got burned out on it.
All right, and Randy's last question is, how often do you replace your line? And he lists specifically your mono, your braid, and your fluorocarbon.
Well, I just switched lines. I've been switching over the last year and a half to a suffix. I'm finding out that was earth shattering. What happened? Are we okay?
Yeah, someone dropped a phone in the room. We apologize.
Bomb going on.
We're all good. Everything's okay.
Yeah, I'm real impressed with this line. Like I said, I just started using it. I'm experimenting with it. It's a suffix. It's called. I've been using the braid since it came out at one Best of Show at ICAST a couple years ago. They're 832 braid, and I like that so much. I figured I'd try the fluorocarbon and the copolymer, and I'm pretty impressed with it. So far, I'm able to leave my line. I used to change it every tournament religiously, but this stuff seems to have just a real good abrasion resistance. I'm just cutting off, maybe a foot or two before a tournament. If I start running low, then I'll replace it. That's the only time you really need to. I kind of like the line when it gets broken a little bit, so that's hopefully that answers that question.
Sure. Let's see. Our next one comes to us from Jeremy Tucker. He said, do you think of fishing as a job to make money for your family? And do you ever hate going fishing?
I never hate going fishing. That's easy. I love competition. I love going out for fun. It just doesn't even matter to me. I just love it out there. And I'll never get sick of it. For the money, in a roundabout way, I guess I'd be fool to say I didn't do it. It's a job. I treat it like a job. It's the way that I do things, traveling with 2 trucks, especially with the economy the way it is and the gas prices. You got to be thinking about making some money or you're crazy. But I love it so much that I would do it if there was no money involved. You know what I mean? So I guess I don't know. I guess if that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. You're just a man who loves to fish.
Love it.
Coming up next, Gordon Holman asks you, can lipless crankbaits be jerked off the bottom this time of year in cold water conditions like you would a blade bait?
That's a good question, and something I know a little bit about because I fish the blade, those blade baits a lot, and I fish the rattling type baits a lot. Coincidentally, the one that I throw, of course, I'm sponsored by Rapala, and I have been for quite a few years. But they, in my opinion, they make the best rattling type bait, rattle trap type of deal you could get. It's called a rip and wrap, and just the perfect shape, and it's you can fish it exactly the way you fish a blade bait. I don't really fish it deep a whole lot, like deeper than say like 15 feet or more. Although I think it would probably be effective if you did it, but there's other things I like to do when they're that deep. But when you're say, from the real super shallow water up to like 10 feet, especially this time of year, that is absolutely one of the best things to fish. And one of the ways I caught fish here this week on Douglas. So, yeah, I'd say it's those two baits are in the same category. I mean, as a matter of fact, I have a box that I fish with, usually in the spring, sometimes in the fall, but in the spring up north, it's in my little boat that I fish out every day that just has those two baits in it. It's got, one of those little boxes with just some rip and wraps, a couple other brands, and then, my blade. So I categorize those two in the same boat.
Is there a water temp that seems like you can throw that lipless crank, that rip and wrap, and it'll outperform that blade bait? Like, is it warmer temps lend themselves to that rattling type bait?
The rip and wrap has a much slower fall rate than a blade bait. A blade bait, is pretty quick. They gotta catch it going up or down. Either way, it's pretty fast. So it's a little more, adapt to the warmer water. Once you get up in the 50s. But when I'm throwing that rip and wrap is early in the year, like now. I mean, we've caught so many fish on those things. It's that or a countdown paddle, those two baits from ice out. I mean, there'll be ice chunks bouncing off our boat all day. You want to catch them with those two baits. So, it's a good cold water bait. It just sinks at the right rate. It's really good.
It's the deal.
Yeah, it's the deal. Like I said, the blade baits are more just a little bit later in the year, and I mostly use those for smallmouth a lot more than I do largemouth.
Okay, and why is that?
Just because of smallmouth tend to want that real erratic, whether you're with an axe wrap jerking it real hard, you gotta kind of get a lot of action going with those smallmouth a lot of times. And a blade bait's just a lot heavier where you can actually rip it, do some stuff with it like that. And a lot of times it's just a reaction with those smallmouth.
Okay. All right, well, I think we got that one covered. David Blankenship asks us our next question. He says, what do you find the main difference between bass in natural lakes is versus bass in man-made lakes like reservoirs?
The main thing is probably shad. We got a lot of natural lakes up where I live, and none of them have shad in them. We have a lot of reservoirs, and all of them have shad in them. So I don't know if that's 100% on or off type of deal, but where I live it is, and a lot of the places we fish on tour it is too. So that's one thing, but I look at those two types of fish as totally different. Natural lake fish, and I don't know every lake in the country, so we fish mostly reservoirs on our tour, but I can speak for, up north where I live. And those natural lake fish tend to be more shallow orientated. They're more cover instead of structure. I see most reservoirs are more structural orientated. There's creek channels and a lot of road beds, maybe house foundations, man-made brush piles, stuff like that. whereas your natural lakes are more, lily pad docks and stuff that you can see and fish. And that's where I grew up. Fishing was more natural. I did a lot more natural lakes than reservoirs. But I don't know. Does that answer that one pretty good?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I think they're a lot different. They're separate species, I would say.
Let's see. TJ Essig says, how hard is it to actually become a professional fisherman, and where's a good starting point?
How much time do we have?
You give us a short version.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a hard road. You got to really love it, like I do. Your family, if you're married, you're gonna have kids. Your family has to love what their part's going to be in it because they play a big part. So you got to start there. But assuming you got that all under control, the best place to start, the only place to start, is in your local club or BFLs. Never starts. That's how I did it. I worked back in those days when I started. You had to qualify for the next step. I fished the BFLs to qualify for the Ever Starts, and then fished the Ever Starts to qualify for the tour. And that by far is the best way to do it. Not only because you have to catch fish to qualify, but you get a chance to measure yourself up, because a lot of us professionals try to fill in the gaps. A lot of times we'll fish a few of those, so you'll get to mingle and see how you measure up against the Luke Clausens and the Brian Thrifts of the world. So in a nutshell, there's a lot to that question. And I'm going to be, it's one of my next seminars. We're going to be traveling around quite a bit talking about that subject too. So I'll keep people informed on my Facebook page when we're going to be around doing that. But it's a you could talk about that. You could write a book on it. I think I can already. That's a tough subject, but it's a hard road. But if you love it and you got everything in place, the support group and the skills, anybody can do it.
Perfect. This Ted Jackson wants to know what the hardest species of fish you've had to catch since you started fishing.
Species. I'm just gonna stick in the bass category and say spotted bass. Not little spotted bass, but quality spotted bass was my biggest challenge and still is today. I think I finally, over the years, started to figure out how to get some of those bigger spots to bite by getting them into boats and other things. So I'll leave it at that. I'll say spotted bass are my number one nemesis.
Well, and for a northern guy too, that's a whole another deal trying to figure out spots. Coming from, you got a lot of experience, smallies, largies too.
We don't have spots where I live. I fished some tournaments. We actually had a cup, Horsewood Cup in Pittsburgh on Three Rivers, and that's the only place that we have spotted bass, and they're just that. So growing up, that's the only ones I get to mess with.
Sure. Let's see, where we at? George Koval brings us our next question. Says, how many fishing rods and lures do you go through in a tournament? I assume what he means by that is how many rods do you usually have on a deck, and will you use throughout a tournament? Well,
it depends on how clued in you are when things roll around, when a tournament actually starts. I probably have more than most usually. There's a couple of guys that I know always have a bunch of rods out. We're kind of all in that little group of guys that have like 17 to 25. I'll have way too many, but in practice, a lot of times, you're not too worried about tripping over stuff, getting the perfect hook set and all that. So clutter isn't always a bad thing, and you just got to have everything out sometimes. That's usually how I am in practice. By the tournament, I still get made fun of a lot in the morning because I'll have maybe 10 or 12. I got one big pile there usually, but It just depends on the exact situation. You know, there's times like here at Douglas, I had 3 rods, you know, and that's a rarity for me. But once when you're really dialed in and focused, and you know exactly what's going on. The more of an understanding you have of what is happening on the lake and what you're going to do and that kind of thing, the less rods you have in the way. But I tend to have a lot more than most people have.
So even if you think, like you said, 3 was pretty low for you. Even if you had a tournament where you were so dialed in, you had 1 rod, you still think you'd want to have an extra 3, 4, 5, 6 on the deck?
I usually do, just because a lot of times I'll have a spot in mind that is totally off the wall that might be, and I'll have 2 rods for that spot. I might have 2 or 3 of those type of spots where it's just maybe I'm flipping and throwing a shallow running crankbait is my main deal, but there might be a little shad thing going on at a certain time of the day, maybe as soon as the sun pops up, so I might have a spinner bait or 2 and a swim bait. And a lot of times it's, 3 or 4 rods with baits on that I haven't caught a fish on yet, like Dave Lefebre. I was the second going into the second day, and I caught all my fish on 2 baits that I never even dreamed I would catch anything on. So you got to have some ideas in your head when you find those type of spots. A lot of times you'll think what might work, and that might be 2 or 3 extra rods that I'll have on the deck. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't.
Sure. Ross Davis says, or he wants to know, do you think the use of power poles has changed the approach to the shallow water bite?
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. I mean, that to me, that's the biggest thing in bass fishing since whatever. I just got my 10-foot blades. The only disadvantage to the last couple of years with the 8-footers is it seemed like every single time I needed to stop instantly, I'd be an 8 foot 2 inches or something. My balls are just barely down. So I got the 10s this year, and they've already paid for themselves. I'm telling you, it's, anybody who has 2 on their boat, you need 2 of them. It's basically you should pretend like you don't need any, or you need 2, because that really stops you from doing this. And once you have them, there's no way you'll ever fish without them again. It's kind of like an ice fishing deal where if you go ice fishing without a flasher, you don't even want to fish.
Yeah, you don't even go. Yeah.
No, I remember one time I drove 2.5 hours down to a lake called Shenango Lake to crappie fish, and I forgot my ducks there, my Marcos, and I just turned around. Yeah, it's the same type of deal. Those power poles are just awesome.
Douglas Jones says, how hard, well, he actually says how hard is it to be away from the road from your family, but you actually travel with your family.
Yeah, I do. If my wife homeschools the kids, I got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old girl, and a 10-year-old boy. So, but this year, we had a little bit of a lighter schedule. So we tried to keep the kids in school, and the principal was good with us, and they're letting them take a few vacation days to come to some of these tournaments. And they were here at Douglas, and they actually left this morning to drive. That's why my phone keeps beeping off. I gotta leave this on during this interview so I can call. It just makes me nervous because we're always together. And today they're driving. My wife is driving home with the kids, and then they'll meet up with me hopefully at Beaver Lake. But it's a cool life. We like it right now. We're taking each year or each day at a time. As the kids get older, how we're going to handle them. The rest of my career out here. But as of right now, it's perfect. We love it. The kids love traveling. They got a lot of really good friends out here on the road. So when they're out on the road, they can't wait to get home to see their friends. And then when we're at home, they can't wait to get back out there and see their other friends. So right now it's going good. I I don't know what's going to happen in the future. You know, they're starting to get into sports and stuff like that. So I'm sure it's going to get a little tougher. I'd like to spend a little more time away from home, you know, without them. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Well, I knew it was only a matter of time until a question like this came up. But A. McKinney Fishing says, do you think all tournament trails should ban the Alabama rig? And if so, why do you feel that way?
Well, if you're going to buy one, this one here is what I it's a Terminator, okay? What was your question again?
Should all tournament trails ban the A rig?
Can we pass on that one, or we got our answer?
I don't know. Yeah, we got a buzzer. We can go along. I knew it was coming up.
No, I did too. You know, I mean, I'm pretty vocal about it, and a lot of the guys, you know, that you asked me a question earlier that kind of segued. I could have segued right into that about making money and some of these tournaments. You know, I'll really admit I'm shooting myself in the foot. I'm going to Beaver without Alabama rigs, and I'm going to try my best to, you know, to hang on. And I'm going to get buried. I know that going in, but I'm just. I've explained it till I'm blue in the face, and I guess, you know, some people can't understand why I wouldn't utilize all the tools available to me. I always have in the past. You know, I use the top of the line of everything, and the newest of everything, and I try to stay on top of the curve. There's something about that I don't like. I don't like it in tournaments. It makes me sick to my gut, seeing people throw it. And I think it diminishes a lot of our other things that are going on. You know, nobody asks a question about, you know, how do you trim your jig skirts anymore? Accuracy, casting doesn't matter anymore. Nothing that we all perfect. You know, everyone out here on this tour is a pro and the best at what they do. Some of us are versatile, some aren't, some specialize in things. But everybody has their niche, and that kind of varies, in my opinion. So that's kind of, you know, I've already dug the hole so deep that I'd be a hypocrite to start throwing it now, and I understand that I could start throwing it and make some money. And the best fishermen, by the way, are still at the top. Those guys that are, you know, it's making a lot of guys that don't normally catch them better, but the same cream of the crop, as Jason Harper always says, always rises. They're better at the technique than the average people. So I do understand that, but it's just not for me. And I just want to, you know, try to make a stand and support that group of guys, because there's a bunch of them out there that don't think they should be in pro tournaments, and I want to, you know, try to be a voice for them, I guess.
All right. Well, I guess we'll kind of move a little more uplifting question here from Ben Otto. Wants to know who you idolized before you became a pro bass fisherman.
Well, before I became a pro bass fisherman, I was so much into music, I probably idolized Brad Paisley or somebody like that. But no, in the fishing world, I like the guys that, you know, I was real into flipping and pitching and casting accuracy. So people like Tommy Biffle, Denny Brower, you know, we're talking about 15 years ago when I was starting to get into it. And now, of course, Van Dam. But those are the type of guys that I always followed real closely, you know. And whenever I saw a video or heard that they were on a video, I always wanted to see, you know, Tommy Biffle still is a great caster, you know, and stuff like that. So those were the guys I looked up to, the ones that fished the way I liked to fish at the time. And then, you know, as I started doing it, you know, I mean, just about the time I started, it was when versatility really started to play a lot bigger. Those specialized techniques were, you know, were kind of going away a little bit more because everybody was getting so good at everything. So, but back in the early days, it was definitely those guys that were out there grinding and flipping, dragging big ones out of the mats and stuff like that.
God dang. Brent Allen brings us our next question. Says, what's the best advice you can give young anglers fishing their first tournament of the season under colder than usual conditions?
I left out Rick Clembeck from that last question. Can I elaborate on that for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Klon, back before I started fishing, I just got to Ada on. I was camping. I wanted to go see a tournament at Potomac, and he was camping right next to me, so I got to walk over and eat. I'm not going to say what we were eating, but I went over and got to hang out by his campfire and everything. I probably messed up his rituals or whatever, but it was pretty cool. I was young, and he talked to me and stuff like that, so it was pretty cool. Okay, you're going to have to tell me that question.
We'll bring it back again. So that was a great answer to Ben's question, the one about who you idolized. Now, Brent Allen, want to know what's some advice you can give a young angler fishing their first tournament of the season under colder than usual conditions?
Well, that's obviously a pretty tough question. There's a lot of parts to it, but just the main thing in colder than normal weather is you're probably going to have to just purposely slow that down. Just do whatever you do. There's different lakes where different techniques work in the springtime. When the water's colder, it's just a pretty much common theme that you have to slow down. So do what works wherever you're fishing, and just maybe try to do it a little slower and focus. You kind of got to know where the fish are, and if you know where they're at, just slow down and be persistent. That kind of thing.
Well,
in that colder weather, cold water and stuff like that, a lot of your baits that don't move as much are more effective. Maybe a jerk bait or, a suspending type of bait like an X-Wrap where you can get it down and kind of leave it sit still for a while and stuff. Slower baits. But that's a loaded question. There's lots of that one.
Sure.
Suggestion.
Well, I think it kind of leads in really nicely to Terry Cardwell has the next question here, and he wants to know what are some good baits to use during tough conditions. So when you're faced with tough conditions on tour, what's something you like to turn to get some bites?
Well, there's a lot of different tough conditions. There's a lot of different reasons why you can say that the fishing's tough. So, but having said that, I guess there's some there's some baits that I go back to when I'm not doing well or just feel like things going wrong that I always seem to dig out. And, like that's another one of those questions where it's pretty loaded. But as far as like shallow fish or something like that, whether I'm any time of the year, you're not getting the bites, or you just need to catch a limit, you can't do it, or something like that. There's like a bait. It's called a debug. It's made by Konami. It's one of those ones that just pulled me out of the dumps. That go on and on about specific tournaments, and I remember exactly the circumstances and everything about those particular ones. Matter of fact, some of them I forgot that I had those in the boat and just went frantic looking for them, found them. But that's one bait that has pulled me up, got me a check at certain times of the year, made me a ton of money over the last 11 years on the tour. And there's other ones too, but that's the first one that comes to my head. It's called a Konami debug. It's just a little flipping bait, finessey. I used to use like a lighter line, 10 or 12 pound test, 8 ounce weight, maybe a 16 ounce weight, and a small 2-aught hook. Just start picking it apart.
What's if you had to pick right now one hard bait that you could take anywhere in the country and have confidence in catching a bass, what would it be?
Right now, this weather, what are we talking about? You got to zone that in for me.
And give me something, let's say Yeah, right now, one hard bait, this time of year.
Without question, it would be a shad grab. It just came out, brand new one. Probably most of you guys don't even know about it. It's a number 6. You know, we've had a 5, and a 7, 5, and plus 1 sometimes, 7, plus 1 other times. Now it's like 6. Real excited about that particular bait. So I would definitely say a shad rat, and I'm not. You're not going to nail me down to one size. I'm going to have some 5s. I'm going to have the 6s, and I'm going to have the 7s.
That's okay.
So I can cover anything from the bank down to about 8, 9, maybe 10 feet. So that's definitely the one this time of year. You can't beat it anywhere in the country.
Excellent. That'll put a period on that set of questions, so we can move on to Colin Johnson. And he wants to know, does water temp have anything to do with color of the bait that you use? Like, is there a correlation there for you?
Not really. The only big correlation for me that has something to do with water temperature would be whether the crawfish are doing their deal. You know, they're out, or the water temperature dictates the shad spawn or where the bait fish are located. But mainly, or even bluegills, you know, the bluegill spawn happens right after the bass spawns and stuff right at the same time, so but usually later. So the water temperature indirectly affects, you know, your bait color choices just because you're trying to match, you know, whatever you're trying, you know, to imitate. So I guess in a roundabout way, it does, if that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
You got to really narrow that down. It's real important to find out, you know, whether you're and that I pretty much said it right there. It's either some type of minnow or shad, crawfish, or a bluegill or a perch, another bait, you know, another panfish type of deal. And that's one of the biggest things you got to do in our sport is try to figure out which forage the specific bass you're trying to catch.
Troy Mims has a good question, and I'll try to reword it a little bit here and keep the same intention. But basically, what Troy's wanting to know is when you know you have an area with fish on it, say from practice, and they're on a specific point, how long do you wait those fish out if they're not biting before you decide to move on?
Yeah, I say all. These are good questions. That's another one of those. It depends, you know. Every circumstance, every tournament, every point, everything about that is different every time, and that's kind of one of the secrets for me over the years was to not have a set thing in my head. You know, like I'm not gonna say the night before I've got this point that I think is loaded with fish. I'm not gonna say, God, if I don't catch them there, I'm done. You know, I don't get myself all psyched up like that.
Yep.
So that's where it starts in your head the night before. But I do know, well, I guess I can't even say that. Sometimes I don't even know where I'm starting when I call my boat. Most of the time, I got an idea. But if I got a point that I know has a bunch of fish on it and I go there and I don't get bit, the main thing is not getting all spun out about. And that sounds really stupid. It doesn't really answer his question, but it's really important. And apparently that might have happened to him one time. That's the first thing. Don't get all spun out. And then if I can't figure out how to get a button to bite, you know, they're going to be at a certain depth. There's going to be a few things that I'm going to try. And it's not the only spot in the world, even though I thought I was going to win the tournament there. So if I can't get them figured out real quick, I'm gone. And I might come back and check it, but I'm not going to camp on something to try to make it happen. And he was talking about the morning, I think, too. So morning bite's usually pretty important to get something going quick. And if it doesn't happen real fast, I'm gone.
All right, we got a few questions left here, getting towards the end. Here's a good one. Curtis Crockright says, as a pretty serious angler and professional drummer myself, I've always thought that my coordination and sense of rhythm is helpful when fishing jerk baits or spinner baits, and especially walk the dog style topwaters. Do you agree with that correlation? Which I don't think a lot of people know that you're a good drummer.
Yeah, that's what I used to do before I fished. And, I actually read that question on the Facebook page, and I thought, man, I hope he asked me that. That's it. And of course, I'm not prepared to answer it, but I just thought it was interesting. It's interesting. It's something I've never thought about, something no one's ever said to me. So, but the more I think about it, it might actually have, as a drummer, there's a lot of, there's just a lot of time signatures and weird stuff that you have to know how to do, and you need to be able to do the same thing with both hands and opposite things with both hands. It's just all part of it. So, I'm sure it makes it a little bit easier for me, but there's some guys, I don't think Zell Roland knows how to play the drums. I could be wrong. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he can, he can walk the dog and fish a poplar just like nobody's business. So I don't think that, I don't know. That's just one of those good questions. I'm glad you asked. It's interesting. I think a lot of people find it interesting, but it probably helps. Probably.
Well, and I hear we might get a sample of your drum skills at Beaver. Is that correct? With Dylan Scott?
Yeah, I'm so fired up about that. It's really cool. I'm getting an opportunity to sit in with them, and I got approached at the last tournament. I mean, that's just pretty cool. I mean, that's my two. It's a win-win situation. If I make the cut at Beaver Lake, I have a shot to win. I won't get to play. If I don't make the cut, I'm not going to go all bummed out because I get to get on stage with some real pros. They're great. If you guys haven't heard them, you need to get online and check them out. It's a guaranteed no-brainer superstar coming to the radio for sure. But I they wanted to play. Kellogg's is a presenting sponsor and everything. So I've got more pressure about that. I've got my drumsticks and all my stuff, my guitars in the background here. I got everything all packed ready to head to Beaver, and that's the first thing going in my truck is all my musical stuff. So really, but they wanted me to play something. I thought it was, they were like, well, we'll do like a cover song, because they don't want me to torture one thing.
Right.
I'm like, man, do this right. I want to give me the single. So I actually talked him into that. I'm gonna go live here and blame myself if I screw it up. But they got one called "This Boy Go Crazy." It's their single. It's gonna be released in June, and that's the deal maker for them. If it goes well, they sell a bunch of albums, which I'm sure they will. That's the song. That's one of the ones I'm gonna get going. So
cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We're getting a little low on time here. I think I got one more question I can ask you. And let's see. It comes from Heath Hester. We'll wrap it up with this one. Wants to know, do you prefer baits with their original colors from the manufacturer, or do you like to custom paint your baits?
Well, that's a good question too. Fortunately, all my hard baits, everything I use, for the most part, 99% is all Rapala stuff. And fortunately, again, they got some really top-notch colors out there that you don't have to mess with. The only thing I do maybe is sometimes sand some of them down just to make them a little duller because they're real shiny.
Sure.
But as far as messing with colors, you really don't have to. They've got everything I need. And just with last year, bringing Mike on board, it's been a great deal. And they got some of those custom ink colors out now that are just totally off normal Rapala stuff. And a lot of those colors are demons. Kind of a scary name. So that's one. There's one old school that I really like, but they look like somebody local painted them. They're
sure.
They're looking for Rapala. So I don't really need to paint. Over the years I've had some things painted, but for the most part I stick with manufacturing customers.
Excellent. Well, Dave, I think we've reached the end of our time here today. I'd like to thank you for joining us. Fans threw some good questions at you. And I guess we'll see you here in a week or so at Beaver.
All right. Looking forward to it.
All right. We'll see you there, Dave.
All right. See you later.
Take care.